Hello and welcome to another episode of the Rush B podcast. Today on the pod, I am going to talk about IEM Oakland 2017. We're going to go over how the teams performed within the past week. Going to talk about which teams I think overperformed, which teams I think underperformed, especially within those groups. Going to talk a little bit about the structure of it because I thought the way that they handled the two different groups and the playoff style was actually pretty interesting, and I thought it was good that maybe some more tournaments in the future could kind of copy. After that, I'm going to talk about some player movement that's going on, some minor NA teams. Then going to talk about more on Stan's statement that he made. I'm sure a bunch of you have read it at this point. If not, go check out Peter Jaguar's. Oh God, I can't even say his last name. Go check out his statement that he posted onto Twitter, Twit Longer. It really gives a good explanation as to his own personal feelings throughout the whole thing, and is definitely one of the more professional statements that you won't see happen a lot. Most people just try and say, thank you for the opportunity. He really went into it. And so I think this is a really good opportunity for anyone who's interested in sports and interested in kind of the life to really look into it. So that's going to be that. That's going to be the second part. And then third part, I'm going to talk about contracts. We're going to go over how organizations come up with a contract wage to give to players, what usual contract terms are. I'm going to talk about buyout clauses, how much those really are, what the standard is for that, and then how organizations try and use those buyout clauses to their advantage and don't really care about players as much as they are for being human beings. So all of that's going to be really interesting. It should be a really good show. A couple notes really quick. Number one, I am going to the E-League Major in Boston in late January. I was able to get my ticket a week or two ago, so I still think that there are tickets available. Should be an amazing time. I'm personally hoping for Liquid and Cloud9 to be there, NA represent. But even if they're not, it should just be an amazing event overall. E-League had the major almost, I think, about this time last year. Not this time, but like in January of 2017. And it was a fantastically held event, and all the players said it was good. So that should definitely be something cool to go see. And on the pod for episode 4, I'm going to have James Banks. He is a esports commentator, a play-by-play guy. He is UK based. He recently casted for the EU minor for this major cycle. Should be a great interview. I'm really excited to talk with him. We're going to go over everything that is the UK scene. We're going to go over different things about the current meta. We're going to go over contracts. We're going to go over basically a lot of whole stuff, and then talk about his professional career and how we got to where he is. So that's going to be the pod and next week's pod. So without much else, let's get into it. Alrighty, let's get into it. So, what I Am Oakland was a super interesting tournament, and I say this because of the way that the groups were. They had 2 groups of 6 teams each. So, you basically had a round-robin style format where the top 3 teams from each progressed on. And you got 3 points for a win, you got 2 points for an overtime win, 1 point for an overtime loss, and then 0 points for a loss. So you played 5 best of ones on maps that would just be the ones that were left over. And in Group A, you had Ninjas in Pajamas, Cloud9, SK, Astralis, Envious, and the Mongols, who are a Mongolian team, obviously, and they got through from the Southeast Asia qualifier. And then in Group B, you had Faze Clan, Optic, Gambit, Renegades, G2, and Liquid. So that's a really stacked tournament. I was really excited to see most of this. Unfortunately, because of how many games that they had to play, and I have a day job, I was unable to see everything. But I still, from what I could listen to as I worked, there were a lot of good tactics that were really brought out during this. And the other big storyline was that Astralis didn't qualify from their Group A, mainly because they had to use Zonic, who is their coach and a former 1.6 pro, because Device actually was sick. And he had to be flown in on a later flight. He had to come straight in, no warm-up, no practice, and just kind of go. And that was significantly harder for Astralis to kind of get into it at all. They did end up with 2 wins in regulation and 1 win in overtime, which put them at 8 points, which was 1 less than SK and Cloud9. SK actually got 2 wins in regulation, 1 win in overtime, and 1 overtime loss, which got them to 9 points, where Cloud9 won out three times in regulation, 2 losses. One of those wins being against SK, actually, which helped secure them into that playoff position. NIP went 4-1, and then Envious went 2-0-1, so 1 overtime loss and then 2 losses total. And then the Mongols straight up lost every game in regulation. So a little sad, but not totally unexpected for the Mongols. They never really were considered to be something big. In Group B, Faze Clan, same as NIP, 4 wins, 1 loss. Optic, almost the same as Cloud9 with 3 wins and 2 losses. Gambit actually was able to sneak in with 2 regulation wins, 2 overtime losses, and then 1 straight up loss. So they actually lost more games than they won, but were still able to qualify because of those overtime loss points. Renegades missed out on 1 point because they lost 1 more time in regulation than in overtime. So that definitely hurt them. And G2, they won once, won in overtime once, and then lost 3 times. And then Liquid, who actually won 2 overtime maps in the beginning of day 1, lost the rest of their maps in regulation, which is really sad to say because I wanted Steel, especially in this first tournament. You couldn't ask a lot from him, just jumping right into the team, but I thought that they needed to perform maybe a little bit better in that squad. I think they should have at least finished above Renegades. Nothing against Renegades. I just think with the squad that they have, they should have done that. G2 surprised me. Gambit, I don't know how Fitch totally is. He's a good player. I think they're missing Zeus a lot more than many people think. Zeus was a really good in-game leader for them, who later went to Na'Vi. And I don't know if Gambit really have the ability to, I guess, win out in this next major with Fitch replacing Zeus. So it'll be interesting to see. And then Optic and FaZe just had a grand old time. And I think they both qualified relatively easily. So moving on to the playoffs, Cloud9 faced Gambit in the quarterfinals, and SK and Optic were on the other side. So with this, the top qualifying team from each group went straight into the semifinals to play the winner of the quarter. So that way they kind of got that first round bye and were able to see out their next competition. So Cloud9 was able to beat Gambit 2-1, SK beat Optic 2-0. SK they had full control that entire time. It really wasn't a contest. And I think Optic, I don't think that they have to make any changes. They show that they're kind of good enough, and I expect with time that they'll get better overall. I don't exactly know who at this point you would drop from that team. However, there was, almost immediately following the tournament, I'm a Pet came out, who is Optic Gaming's coach, came out and said changes need to be made. And the one change that is going to be happening for Optic Gaming is Mixwell is now going to go back to the op, and Alu is going to rifle. This is a very interesting change because Mixwell really did not want to be the main opper at all, ever. When he was with Optic Gaming in the North American side that they had, he was the main opper, and he always constantly said how he never wanted to do it. He wasn't happy doing it, but he did it for the betterment of the team. And he was one of the best operators that were playing in North America. He was just simply unbeatable. He was really aggressive. He was able to get good picks. He wasn't put into clutch situations, which was also important, and what you don't want to use really as an opper. You don't want to just leave the opper as the one guy left in a 1v3 scenario. It's a lot harder for them to try and clutch it out. But because it was because he was so aggressive with the rifle, he would either get traded after 1 or 2 kills or just get traded after the first. So he was able to make a good impact kill in the beginning to try and carve out positioning for the rest of his team, whereas Alu was a more passive opper and also was really streaky. He would be really hot and be hitting his shots and having a really good game, and then he would be completely missing shots that he should make like 9 out of 10 times. And that was something that Optic really couldn't rely on. When they need shots to be hit, Mixwell would do it. And Alu may do it sometimes, and he may do it like all the time for one map and then none for the rest. So that was a big problem, and I think that's why the reason for the big switch. It's going to be interesting to see Alu rifle again. He was really strong with mouse sports when he was on there, and then with Faze, he did rifle a little bit as the op kind of swap between people, but he usually was the main opper. So we'll see how that goes. I think it could be beneficial for the team. It'll definitely be a good team-changing dynamic. So the other thing I want to talk about is Cloud9 in day one, just like Liquid, they won out. They got their 2-0 wins. They were looking really strong, top of the group. They seemed to really just go after it. And then their first 2 matches of day 2, or day 3, I think it was day 2, they struggled and they lost their first 2. And I think that really kind of set them back, and they had this day 1, day 2 mentality. They may have gotten like a little bit easy, a little bit not so crazy in terms of just being on their game. And then in their last match against SK was definitely just, it was huge for them to win that game over SK and secure their position in the playoffs. That really shows that that Cloud9 has the ability to compete with these top teams. And I think that at this major, they'll really secure their legend status once again, which will again be huge for North America. And it'll show that Tarek and Stewie and Skadoodle and Automatic and Rush are North America and the US's best players. What else? I want to talk also a little bit about Tarek. I know this is NA focused, but they're my favorite team because Liquid died with Eco and Simple leaving. So Cloud9's my new favorite team. I don't know. I really love both. I really like both teams. I think they're very strong. But Cloud9 just, I don't know. I can't not watch them, which is always the interesting thing. I can at sometimes not watch Liquid because I've always felt so frustrated with Liquid. But Cloud9 just sometimes you either know they're gonna win or they're gonna lose. And the times that you know you're gonna win with Cloud9, you just kind of sit back and you just enjoy it. Team Liquid is always a heart attack every time you watch them. So I've tried to emotionally divest from them. Looking at day 3, so looking at the playoff match between Cloud9 and Gambit, Tarek was having a lot of trouble trying to figure out and trying to kind of out-tactic the abilities of Hobbit and Adren. So those 2 guys were really strong fragging-wise over the course of the 3 maps. And I think them being pushed onto Mirage allowed Tarek to try a lot more adventurous tactics. And I want to go to round 25, I think it is. So it might be around 26. Anyways, it's it's the second to last round of the Mirage map 3. So Tarek is calling for basically a double fake. He is trying to throw smokes over onto B site when they're outside of B, when they're over by underpass. They're throwing smokes out and they're kind of making some noise. Meanwhile, it's Stewie and Tarek on the B side. On the A site, you have Skadoodle, Rush, and Automatic. And those guys are trying to carve out, get a pick, try and make it look like they're actually, committing to that site to try and draw, I think it was Hobbit away from the window. Or whoever on Gambit was playing on the window side, they were trying to draw him away so that way they would be able to have an easy 2v2 onto the B site, carve out, get the bomb, and drop it. And have that pick advantage. So they didn't end up getting that. They ended up losing it. They were running out of time, and everything kind of just fell apart. And this is where a lot of concerns were brought up from the commentators and from the analysts, because when Cloud9 gets to that point of where they're just so close, they kind of freeze up. They kind of don't take it to the end. So Tarek at the end and as Nothing was saying after the game, the last round where they rushed B, that wasn't his call. That was a Skadoodle or Stewie call. Because as nothing would say, whenever they try and really do a good tactic and really try to get a strat, bait out the other enemy team, and make it basically something way too complicated, Stewie or Skadoodle would basically jump in and say, no, screw it, we're not doing that. We're just going to do a straight up simple tactic because we know that we can out-frag them. And that's what they did. They rushed B at the end, were able to just pick apart Gambit and secured the map to win everything, which was huge for them. Absolutely huge, because Cloud9 needed this win to, again, cement that they're not, just because they're from NA, they're not that bad. And a confidence booster just as well. Another top four finish for this team that's missing out on the ESL Pro League Finals in Odense. This was an important victory. They should have had this one 2-0 though. They had advantages from their CT side on Overpass. And Overpass is traditionally a CT-sided map, so I think they ended they had almost a 6-round lead at some point on that Overpass map on their CT side, and they just threw it away. And they let the game get too close, and then they never could really find anything strong on their T side. They did end up winning about 6 rounds in a row to secure overtime on Overpass, which was ungodly. And a point of which I had actually turned it off because I was just so disgusted with Cloud9. And then when I came back and saw that they went into overtime, I turned it off again because I was worried that me turning it off meant that they would win. So they didn't end up doing it, so I don't blame myself. But they basically should have been tilted after losing that first map. They should have just been thrown off the face of the earth, distracted, and no way come back and win Cobble comfortably, which they did. So credit to the Cloud9 boys. It was a really good event for them, and I think we're going to really expect to see more progression from them later on. The other thing I want to talk about is Rez. Rez had a monster of a tournament after a lot of concerns that he wasn't going to be showing up, that he hasn't really showed up in a lot of previous ones. He was named the HLTV MVP for IEM Oakland all throughout the grand final against Faze. Rez, even towards the end when they were playing on Cash, Rez had these ungodly lurks where he would go from the B site, go through B main, and get his way into Garage and be able to pick apart one player, go and then get the other, like Op or whoever's on boost, and be able to at least take 2 out, tilt Faze, try and have to make them adjust. And this was a good way to attack Faze because Faze likes to dictate the pace of play. And when Ninjas went in and tried to make those slight adjustments, Faze couldn't really come back from that. They're always the ones that are wanting to be in control, and that I feel like that's due to them being given so much respect on the maps. They're feared because they are the number one team, and they get a lot of, okay, we're going to see how they play, and then we're going to respond. Ninjas went in, and you could see it constantly, especially even on Inferno when they were on their CT side by heavily nading down Banana and getting either 1 or 2 kills or bringing them really low and being able to clean up the 2 or 3 frags. Ninjas didn't give them a lot of respect, and when they did, they lost. They lost, and they easily lost in those maps. So I think it's really important that when you want to counter Faze, you need to not show them respect. You cannot treat them as if they are the best team in the world. You have to be strong and aggressive after them. So those are my thoughts on that. Yeah, I think that Faze is just. I just don't think that you can give them that much respect there because they will take that game every single time. And so Ninjas didn't do it, and they were able to secure their 3-2 win over Faze and take the tournament for the second time in a row. IEM Oakland. They won it back in 2016 and won it this time in 2017. So, huge win for them. All right, we'll be right back. And moving on to some player movements. So first, let's talk about the Godsent Changes. So Godsent, the Swedish organization, has dropped / benched Dennis and Schneider. Dennis is looking to be transferred away. He and Schneider released twit longers that basically stated they did not like the entire team environment. They'd been together for about 8 months, and it was kind of an experiment to see how the team could perform. And there were just lots of problems. They never really were a cohesive unit. They seemed to just not have great imaginative strats. There were players that were put into positions that couldn't really be there, so that was a problem. For Schneider, there's really, I don't know where he goes. I really don't. I think that there might be some other Swedish teams that can use him. There's no way he goes to Fnatic. There's no way that he goes, God, I don't even know. I mean, maybe Epsilon, maybe, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of opportunities for him right now. He could join a mixed EU team. Maybe he goes to the US and tries to play with some American team. But I don't. There are no rumors that really are out there right now for Schneider. There's kind of a dead market for him. He hasn't really shown a lot of quality over the past year, and I think that's pushed a little teams away because they don't know exactly what he's capable of. As for Dennis, opportunities are just everywhere for him. He's still really good on the pistols, and his rifling and his ability just overall is exceptional and one of the above. There were some rumors that he might go to Optic and replace who knows, but that's just one of the premier EU mixed teams that is an option for him. No one on Faze really looks in risk of being dropped. I think everyone there is strong individually and enough cohesively that team will stay together. I mean, they won the 2 tournaments in a row, the 250K tournaments before IEM Oakland. They reached the finals of this tournament. So I think they want to especially keep the same team together as they're searching for that major. And I think they actually have to, because they have the same core 3 of Kerrigan, Rain, and oh my God, I'm forgetting his name. That's awkward. Wow. I need to look that up. Wow. I feel bad about myself right now. Oh, Nico. Oh my God. Now I feel even worse. So, Rain, Kerrigan, and Nico all retain their legend status. I'm pretty sure that they were all legends. Anyways, it's those 3 that were basically part of the last major winning team. Guardian and Olafmeister were added later on. So they have to keep Rain, Kerrigan, and Nico together in order to continue with that major slot. So that's why they're going to be together. And so Dennis would have to replace either Olaf or Guardian, but it doesn't look like they're going to do to either one, as they've been performing just honestly so well. And what else? We have, Steel to Liquid. Brazilian Steel went to Liquid, as I mentioned this in the last podcast, the emergency one. He is going to be, I guess, kind of filling in the same slot as Stanislaw and really replacing that secondary caller concept. So Stan released a statement on Twitter where he talked and went really in depth about his time on Team Liquid. And he talks about how he was, trying to work within either a structure style. He moved to a fluid style. He was really trying to respond to how the team was. The problem was, basically right away when he joined the team, he knew that something was off. And that's not what you want. And I think maybe Stan was a little bit short-sighted in joining Liquid so early. I can't even, I would want to blame him, but I can't. He joined a team and he thought he was going to be the in-game leader. He thought he was going to be the one that was actually captaining this team. In his tweet longer, he talked about how Zeus, the captain, is actually the one that controls everything. He's the one making the tactics. He's the one dictating pace of play. He basically is trying to tell the players, okay, you're going to be the one that gives my message because I can't do it anymore, because I can't talk to you directly over the headset during the match. You're just going to have to do what I say. And the problem was Stan and Zeus had clashing ways of how to have team tactics. And you can't have that if you can't have that and have both coexist peacefully. You can't. So Stan goes on. He talks about how he was, changing his own in-game leader role into becoming more of a lurker. He was putting Twist into better positions. It allowed everyone to kind of improve better. Nitro started calling a lot more. And then it felt stale. He says, after ESL New York, we started to become stale. Once we started losing again, attitude issues from the past resurfaced and new issues alone arose. I don't think it's a big secret that on Team Liquid there are some egos, there are some attitude issues that have always persisted, which needs to be figured out. And the big rumor is that Elige is the one that has behavior issues on the team. He has gotten better, to his own credit, and he does admit it. He admits how he used to be very either angry, or he would shut down whenever they started to lose. He would get tilted and affected by the game really easily, and you can't have that from your star fragger. So he's gotten better, but with this statement, it kind of alludes that it might not just be Elige, it might be other members of the team without even talking about it. So he talks about how during his entire time on the team, Zeus was trying to control everything. He talks about how if Stan didn't move into a gaming house, Zeus was going to quit the team. Zeus basically was like, Zeus gave them the ultimatum, and then Zeus didn't follow through with it. And they're talking about going over demos reviews, picking out little mistakes. Stan said that they wanted to focus on big picture. Zeus argued, no, we need to focus on little things. That's what's going to, bring out the best of everyone if we can understand these fundamental problems. Let's see. He also talked about how Zeus kept kind of nitpicking at him, and Stan really took it personally. And that was a problem. He then alludes to how when they attended the I Buy Power event, something just felt off from the start, and that he basically assumes that the decision was made from the beginning of that tournament that he was going to be replaced by Steel, which is not, and something I said in my prior podcast, that's not something that is most likely not true. Steel and the negotiations for Steel's buyout were definitely in discussions for not even just the past week, but for weeks or maybe even a month. And that is good and standard for the way that transfers occur. It would be shocking if they did it in the course of a few days. It'd be really uncommon. But it's good that they were working together, that Team Liquid and Immortals were working constantly to try and find the best home for Steel. And then the decision to simply bench Stan was very sudden, and I don't know if that's always the best way to handle it. I think there might have been a better way, but the issue was they wanted Steel to get right into the Intel Extreme Masters tournament, so following the event, they kind of just had to do it right then. So that was some bit of an issue. Other cool news, Rubino from Team Dignitas. So I talked about, basically in my last podcast, said how Dignitas was Dignagon. Well, the roster of Dignitas was gone. Rubino is staying with the organization, and he is going to create a full Norwegian team. So whether that includes JKM, I'm not entirely sure, but I know that he wants to create that Norwegian team. And as of right now, they're going to stay based in Europe. I don't expect them to come to America and come to the Philadelphia 76ers complex that they have. They'll probably stay over there. Team Rogue in North America is adding Rix and Relics, based off of comments made from Hiko's stream on Twitch. During one of the pugs, people on the chat were asking him about transfers, and he mentioned that they had been trialing with Rix and Relics and would be most likely picking them up. CLG is most likely to make changes. They were talking. Who was talking? Cutler talked about the losses recently, and especially not making it to the ESL Pro League Finals, a team killer. So I expect to see some movement there. I expect a big shift and a big change to happen after the major, though. I think some teams are trialing and working and really figuring out different lineups and figuring out different, structures that would make sense. I could foresee Stan possibly going to CLG and being a secondary caller and a lurker. We'll see, but I hope that Stan finds a good home. I think he's one of North America's better in-game leaders, and I think things don't work out on Team Liquid, but on any other team, he certainly will be a hot commodity. He was one of the best in-game leaders with Optic Gaming when they had the North American-based team, so people shouldn't forget that. They should really remember that and remember his skill. So hopefully he finds a team. And apparently there are some rumors that Angel is allegedly available for transfer. That's unfortunately that's all I got. I don't really have anything more concrete on that. Those were just some rumors that have been floating around. And that's going to do it for player movement for right now. I had originally reported that Znader and Dennis were going to go to Ninjas in Pajamas. Znader, not so much anymore, from what I understand. Dennis, at the time, was considered a possibility, but after IEM Oakland and with Rez being so dominant and every one of the players kind of really stepping up, it remains to be seen. I think Draken didn't have the best tournament that he could have, but he still was exceptional overall. So I don't think a swap of Dennis and Draken makes complete sense, but who knows? Crazier things have happened. So that's going to be that on the player transfer side. All right, guys. Next up, I'm going to talk a lot about the contracts and really get in depth about that. So I'll just take a quick little break and we'll be right back. And we're back. Now, I want to talk about player contracts and buyouts within esports and, in a larger scale, professional sports as a whole. So I've mentioned once or twice previously in some podcasts and on Twitter, I have graduated with a degree in economics where I specialized in sports economics, and my previous work history has let me be part of 2 professional soccer organizations within the United States. As part of those jobs and as part of that research, I was given access to information on basically the finances of these professional organizations. I understood how they operated, I understood what their limitations were, and I understood how they got to giving a contract to a player. I was able to really nail down and see these different contracts being offered, what the actual wages were, and how everything was kind of decided. And it was a really interesting process. So when I think the first thing that people need to understand about players from an organizational standpoint is that, and this sounds harsh, but they're not players. They're assets. They're assets just like a car, just like a stock, especially so in sports where the team is profit maximizing, because there are 2 different organizations that will fall under these. They're either profit maximizing or they're win maximizing. Profit maximizing teams are going to be teams that are looking for up and coming star players. Basically, these are the guys that find the Stewie 2Ks, the onliners. They pick them up and hope that in 2 or 3 years or even 6 months, they're going to be worth a huge payout. So we have some teams that are profit maximizing that we can tell from example. Mouse Sports has been a profit maximizing team as of late, especially with the sale of Nico to Faze. Hellraisers is another profit maximizing team. And then a former team of Splice was definitely a profit maximizing team with picking up onliners. In looking at win maximizing teams, we're going to look at Faze Clan and we're going to look at Optic. Those two teams, and furthermore, we can get into like G2, Envious, Liquid, and what would be another good win maximizing? Ninjas and Pajamas. So those teams are teams that basically do not care so much about the losses that they will incur from signing greater players because they have the hope that they're just going to continue to win and be great, and then maybe it evens itself out in the end. They're the ones that can afford to put up so much capital on the onset that it pays off for them in the long run. So that's what makes win maximizing teams work, whereas profit maximizing teams don't have that capital up front, have lower operating costs, have lower operating budgets, and therefore must go after the hidden gems in order to keep, their organization afloat. And that's not to say that these organizations are bad. It's just the way that they're structured. And it's also the way that you have to look at it for why certain teams are going to have buyouts anyways. So breaking it all down, what are these player contracts and how does an organization come up with the salary it gives to players? So first, we have to understand the market. Let's look at Virtus Pro. We understand that Virtus Pro players earn about $25,000 a month. So let's look at the market in the macro. Europe. Actually, go even bigger. The world. Okay, 25K, upper echelon. Now look at Europe, upper echelon. We know that 25K is for a team that is a consecutive major winner, that is constantly a premier team that's always at the top of invites to major tournaments, 250K tournaments that have the biggest marketability. So they're paid top dollar. So 25K is going to be a rough cap for European teams, right? And probably for the world. So that's about your cap. So that's $300,000 per year per player. Multiply that by 5, you're paying about $1.5 million in wages just for a CSGO team, just for the players alone. Doesn't even take into account anything else, such as travel expenses, such as any other expenses that they have associated with it, and that's it. So you're paying about $1.5 million plus for that team, and then bringing a coach, bringing analysts, bringing everything else. You're looking at over almost $2 million a year. That's for teams that have a lot of financial backing and can afford those kinds of contracts. Virtus Pro is a Russian organization that has a lot of money behind it, and therefore they're kind of able to do that. Those players are signed for the next 3 years. They signed 4-year contracts, I think, last year, so they have 3 more years left onto those contracts at $25K a year, which, if we continue to see the explosion of money into esports, it might turn out to be a good bet in the for them in the future. I expect in the next two years that contracts at $25K might be the norm for these players. And this is $25K a month, not a year. A year they're earning about $300,000. So we recognize that this is probably very high, $25,000 a month. So most European teams are not going to be offering this to their players. LDLC is not offering their teams $25,000. They're offering the players basically what they're worth, what their skill level is. So let's go so the floor can be anything, right? The floor could be, we're going to send you to tournaments. We're going to give you some free gaming gear. Or we can put you on $500 a month, $1,000 a month, kind of something, whatever it is. We know from a twit longer that Smooya got $2K a month being part of Epsilon as one of the top UK players. So that's also a good baseline to kind of go on of. Maybe not a ESL Pro League level player, but someone who's at the bottom. So 2K kind of seems like a good bottom for an organization or for a player within those kind of organizations. So that's really where the range is. We're looking at 2K to 25K. And so that's where a organization is going to look at it and say, okay, how can I give a 2K to a player that's better than Smooya? Like that's their goal. Their goal is to try and find players that are the best for the cheapest price. And so that way they accomplish both things. They can profit and they can win. In North America, I'm trying to keep going with this market thing, it's kind of the same thing. There were rumors that Cloud9, who is one of NA's premier teams, also got around. There were rumors of 25K. I don't know if that's entirely sure, but let's say that it is. Again, so now we know that between Europe and North America, the cap is about 25,000. And then the baseline is also probably around 1,000 to 2,000. So that means that teams at the bottom of the ESL Pro League, so teams like Rogue and Ghost Gaming, they're probably earning about 2K a month. So that's only about 24,000 a year, which is not a whole lot. And it's not exactly going to make you or want you to quit your day job. So stay in school. In looking at Asia, South America, and other regions, those contracts are going to be significantly lower simply because they do not have the same skill level. They do not return the same economic value that a team with a skill level in North America or Europe does. There's not the same kind of marketing. There's not the same kind of returns that they'll get. So therefore, their contracts are not of the same size. They're probably even lower. So competitive salaries are important to understand. And they're going to be broken up into the different positions that certain players have. Not all oppers are paid the same. Not all in-game leaders are paid the same. And not all riflers and support players are paid the same, even on the same team. It would not make economic sense for you to pay the best opper in the entire European region the same that you would the fourth best rifler. It just wouldn't. And that's based off of supply and demand. For riflers, it's a lot cheaper because there's almost an exodus of good riflers now in the European scene. So riflers are automatically not going to be sure or should not be paid as much. And this is where my experience within professional sports comes in. For positions of players where there is almost an oversupply, they would never offer contracts that were of the same value to everyone else. If we had the best goalkeeper for soccer, we would not offer him the same as basically the center midfielder who was about the seventh in the league. You just wouldn't. You'd pay the goalkeeper more based on the position. He would be the best paid goalkeeper in the league, and the midfielder would be paid relatively to the rest of the league. And that's how that works. So the Ninja's players, Rez, because he's new, because he's young, he should not be paid and should not have a contract that pays him as if he was a player like Get Right. Because Get Right is a proven and consistent player at the top level. He should not be paid in that same way. Now, I don't know if they are paid the same. They might be just because of an organizational standpoint of just how they do things. But that's how that's how it works in professional sports. And I expect that to actually occur, especially within Overwatch League and especially in League of Legends. Now that you have basketball organizations coming into it, you're having traditional sports venture more into esports, you're going to start to see these kinds of changes where players, because it used to be that all the players of part of the team would get the same salary. I think you're now going to see a little bit of a difference. Now, when looking at buyouts, this is where the teams would take, and they would prioritize the star player. So let's operate under the assumption that all of the esports players in an organizational team are paid the same. Their buyout clauses are going to be different. And that's based off of, again, supply and demand. You're not going to give them all the same buyout clauses when the in-demand opper is significantly more wanted than your rifler. You're going to have a high buyout clause. Some organizations purposely put high buyout clauses as a way to deter anyone else from basically poaching them. Others have lower ones, and that's based off of players choosing to take a lower salary for that lower buyout clause so that they have more freedom of movement should the team degrade in quality over time. Nico, on his move from Mousesports to Faze, was famously reported to be $500,000. And I think there were reports that Olafmeister's move, or Olafmeister and Guardian's move, were almost of the same value. That is a lot of money. $500,000 for a esports player is a lot. Traditionally, we see the contract times 10 is the buyout clause. But there's no way in the case of Nico that he was being paid $50K a month. And we just know that from common sense. You're not paying them $50K a month when the highest is 25. So what does this mean, and why are they getting to it? Well, the asset value of Nico and what he actually brought to the team in terms of whatever advanced metrics that they're using showed that he was the best player by far and away over everyone else, and therefore he was worth $500,000 in terms of economic return. That's what that means. In terms of the buyout clauses are basically set up so that way teams, when they choose to purchase a player or transfer a player, they're trying to see, okay, this investment, I need to earn this, I need to get this economic return back and then some from his performance. And so they value, so Faze Clan valued Nico's contribution to the squad at $500,000. And what has that resulted in? Well, they're going back to the major. They've just won two 250K tournaments in a row. Their marketing has reached all over Europe now, and they're the number one team in the world. So all of that marketing, all of those ads, all of the sponsorships easily come back and bring that $500,000 back to Faze Clan. And so that is a win maximizing team that was able to profit in the long run because they had the capital up front to get those players and to have that opportunity. So this is why certain players have such high and outrageous buyout clauses, is because they're so good and because they're so much more valued than everyone else that they have them. Some buyout clauses make no sense. Like allegedly, Smuya has and I only say this because I know this from a tweet longer that he posted, he has a buyout clause of $100,000. No one's paying that. No one is paying $100,000 for an unproven UK CS player. And no disrespect to him, he's not worth $100,000. He just simply isn't. But Epsilon is using this as a way to ensure that if he ever did become as good throughout the duration of his contract, they would be able to get their money. So the high buyout clause was a bet that he would turn out to be really good. However, they kind of screwed him because they decided to abandon the whole UK squad and go with an entirely different team. So that obviously hurt him, and because he's locked into that 2-year contract, Epsilon also has him on a reduced contract since he was benched, and now are just waiting for anyone to come in and try and swoop in. If Epsilon is smart, they're going to wait for the first offer that they get and then pawn him off. It doesn't make sense to have a depreciating asset on your books because you're just giving it money while it just sits there. And I'm not trying to say this man is just sitting there and collecting a paycheck, but what I'm saying is Smuya's not getting better. He's not in a team. He's not improving his visibility. The best move that Epsilon would have is to simply loan him to another team. Say, yes, you can go play on this other team, and this other team will have you, and they'll use you. They can't buy you because we still want you, and we still want your buyout clause and your potential value, but we want you to get better. And this way it benefits both parties. Smuya gets to continue to play in a competitive scene, and Epsilon is able to reap the benefits by having an appreciating asset, an asset that's growing in value, because that's all it is. You need players to continue to play and continue to improve in order to prove their worth in their high buyout clauses. Their high buyout clause also is a good way to try and invite offers at a higher rate than they would if it was lower. If Smuya's buyout was about 50, then teams might offer 20 or 25. But with it being 100, now they're looking at 40, 45 just for this player. And that's just a conversation starter. So that's why some teams have just these outrageous buyout options, because it's just the best thing that they have available. Contracts in esports are hard. They're difficult. They're not easy. They don't usually benefit the player. They benefit the organization. And this is what's incredibly hard. Many players can get trapped into these contracts, especially when they sign them when they're incredibly young. You sign them when you're 17 or 18 and you're just excited to be able to get a contract and get paid for doing something that you love, and you don't realize the long-term implications of it. Signing away your ability to play for any other team for a year or even longer can hamper your own ability. So, and I say this because I've witnessed many players who were signing contracts and then simply after only a bad injury or a bad couple of performances set aside and unable to participate in anything else. And because of that, they weren't getting game time. They couldn't improve. No other team would come in and sign them. So if you are a young professional player and somehow you have stumbled onto this podcast, try to avoid long-term contracts. It may seem, attractive because someone is paying you and they're going to pay you for a long time as the contract has. But you want to make sure that, especially because you are so young, you're only locked in for a short term, not a long term, not many years, not many months. You want to keep your ability to move under your own control. So that's just a little bit about contracts. Message me on Twitter or hit me up in an email. If you guys do want to talk more about contracts, I've studied antitrust law, contract law, and I've worked in professional sports, so I understand a little bit more. Trying to keep the podcast short. I know it's getting long now. Jeez, I'm getting really long there. So I'm probably just going to wrap this up right now. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's listening. Remember to try and get your E-League tickets because I know that they are running out soon and that I will be there. Make sure you also tune in next week when I have James on the pod. It's going to be a great show. Other than that, have a good one. And remember, always rush B.